I think one of the greatest misunderstandings about money is God's original intent for it. And I'll give you a great example of this. Have you ever come to the end of the month and you don't feel any wealthier, any wiser, any healthier? It's basically like nothing has transpired, nothing has gotten better in your life over that entire month. Time just kind of continues to pass by. Did you know that that wasn't God's original intent for wealth? And today we're going to talk about it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name is Mckensy Long. Excited to have you. I've been a financial professional for over a decade. Glad to have you. For those of you guys that are returning, make sure you smash that like button and hit the subscribe as well. And today we're talking about God's original intention for wealth. Now, what you see today was not God's original plan, and I think it's important to talk about this because the original plan was to live in the Garden of Eden. It's the perfect living, no suffering, no death, no worries, no nothing, just complete perfection. As it says, God saw everything that he had made, and it was very good. And it kind of makes me think, or the only way I can really picture this is my wife and I, for our honeymoon, we went to the Dominican Republic and we spent an entire month there. It was absolutely beautiful. We got to see the culture and the landscape and the water and the sun and everything else, and it was absolutely fantastic. So kind of try to imagine the most beautiful place you've been to or seen on the internet and multiply that by 1,000. A limitless honeymoon, basically forever. Just complete abundance. Anything that you could want to eat, drink, or do, or see, you could do it. That to me is the best representation that I can fathom in my mind of what the Garden of Eden must have looked like. And part of me kind of makes me wonder, why is it that we have such a huge desire, most people, to be able to go out and travel and to see beautiful things and have different experiences and go to different parts of the world and see what that looks like? Maybe there's something to do with that. But remember, what we see now was because everything changed. All of the suffering and the death and the challenges, that came after sin entered into the Garden of Eden. And I think it's really important to remember that, because a lot of times people ask questions like, well, why does God allow these things? Or why is life the way that it is now? Why does God allow these things to happen? But to understand that that's not the way that we were meant to live. It's the way that we were forced to live because of sin entering into the world. And you might be asking, well, what does that have to do with God's intention for wealth? Well, I think it's the best example of it. If we imagine that, and some of you guys are going to go an entirely different route for this conversation. Half of you are going to go, see, God is definitely a Democrat and he believes in socialism or communism, and because everything was free, right? You didn't have to worry about healthcare. You didn't have to worry about buying stuff. Everything you wanted was free. And the other half of you are going to go the opposite direction, say, see, God is a capitalist and he had so much extra, he was willing to give it away to other people and help them be, and that's not where we're going with this video, okay? But what it does show is God's generosity, that everything that we needed was already provided before we got here. And maybe there's some clues in that. Maybe there's a hint that we're supposed to live our life generally. Maybe there's a hint in that. Maybe that we're supposed to live our life generously. If we were created in his image, maybe we're supposed to act in the same way. And what's interesting is science backs this up as well, and you've probably even felt it in your own life. When are you the happiest? When are you the most fulfilled? When do you really get recharged? And for most of us, it's when we're doing something for somebody else. It's when we're helping those that can't get the help themselves. It's when we're doing things for other people, when we're watching our kids grow and we're helping to guide people, or maybe it's in a business. It's one of the things that I love about business and being able to develop people. And what I love about financial services, taking somebody who's wet behind the ears and doesn't understand how all these things work, and then they can live their life generously because they understand how money works. So why is it that we feel so good when we do that? And why do we feel so much worse when we turn inside and all we do is focus on us and what we want? Which seems to be a big push for what the world wants right now. Everybody being individual and everybody doing all these things depending on how they feel inside, and all of these things about just it's about you and what you want and how you feel. And I think that's headed in the wrong direction. And we'll talk about the impact that that has really on your generosity. And that's important because I think there's clues in human nature and the reason why we feel good about some things and we feel bad about other things. That's not something you can really explain with science, but that we can find out and we can measure and we can see that it's fundamentally true. And that's why I love doing these videos for these 7 million viewers. Okay, not quite, but come on, like maybe one day, okay? But it's why I love to do business and coach on finances and do these things, because you can take somebody who's stuck in something and they can't see the picture outside of themselves. Isn't that basically what God does for us? We're living and we can only see what we can see, and then we're given this vision of things that are bigger than us, than things are outside of us. And that's usually where people are in their business or in their finances. They can only see what they can see, and giving them that perspective to see things outside of themselves, that they can grow into somebody and something bigger than they are now. And I love doing those things. So I think it's important to talk about those things. Talk about the things that take away our joy and our fulfillment, the things that make us less generous, if that's really what helps drive us and put us in a better position and to make us feel better and have fulfillment and joy. If it's based around generosity, it's important to understand the antithesis, the opposite of those things. What is the opposite of generosity? What steals our ability to be generous? And I think the things that give us less time, the things that take our time, the things that take away our money, the things that don't allow us to have the stuff or do the things that we want to do. And I think the first one of those is envy, especially with social media right now. People are struggling with this so bad, but it's not something that's new. It's not something that's unique. And envy causes us to do things and want things that we maybe shouldn't have right now. It makes us to buy things that maybe we can't afford right now because we want people to see us in a certain light, and we want them to have feelings about us, because obviously people view with the outside. So that envy of where people are at, or the things that they've gotten, or the things that they've done, we can feel that inside of ourselves. And unfortunately, when I'm planning with people, they oftentimes are waiting to be happy when they have that big house, or when they have $4 million in their bank account, or when this stock goes to a certain height. Well, then they're going to be happy. And what that says to your psyche is that you can't be happy now because you don't have the stuff. You don't have the stuff to make you happy. And when you're unhappy because you don't have stuff, it makes you less generous. It means that you don't know how to get where you're going, and you don't feel that you're going to be able to get there, and your life isn't moving ahead. So how can you afford to give to somebody else? Doesn't that sound so backwards when we're talking about it? But this is the cycle that we get into when we don't understand these things, when we don't understand money and how it works. And because we're so envious and we have to have these things to be happy, we're so stuck on what we have and we can't give anything away, that we're holding it so tightly that it starts to rob our time and starts to actually rob our finances. And ultimately it makes us less generous, we're less fulfilled, so we don't even want to do those things. And it feels like things are tightening in around us because we have less fulfillment. It means we don't work as hard as our job, which means we don't learn as much as we should or could, or do the things that we could in that job to be able to make more money. We don't look or think about advancing our career, which would give us more money, because we're so concerned about where we're at and we're not fulfilled and we're not doing things outside of the basic things that we could do. And then we're surprised that our life isn't moving forward. And then number two thing that robs our generosity is, while we're in this feeling of being envious and trying to get more but not putting in the time and effort to do it, well, that happens because we don't have a plan. We don't know where we're going in our life. And do you remember when you used to set goals? Maybe it was in high school, maybe it was in college, but your goal was to graduate, or your goal was to make a team, or your goal was to finish a project, and how good it felt, the struggle and involving of the deadline and how that felt, and it turned your stomach, and you put in this work and this effort, and then you accomplished something, and maybe you graduated, or you finished that project, or you got on that sports team, or you guys won a championship, and how great that felt and all that fulfillment. Well, and ideally that was a plan. Just the difference was you had a plan going through school. Somebody else was planning those things for you. Maybe they heard you say you wanted something and they put you on the path to be able to accomplish it. Well, once we get out of that and we become free and independent, well, we no longer set goals because we don't have somebody doing that for us. So I'll bet you don't have a plan for what your life is going to look like. You probably don't even have a plan that if extra money came in that you knew what you would do with it. And I don't mean you know what you're going to do with it and that you'd go, oh, well, I'd pay off my debt first, or I would buy this thing. You don't have a written plan of where that money's going to go. So guess what happens? When you do get blessed with some money, maybe you get a nice tax return, maybe you get a check in the mail for something that you did, guess what happens? It gets wasted too. It goes into that envy category because you don't have a written down plan of where it's supposed to go. And if you don't have a plan, you need one. Click on the link below. Let's do a call. Let's get some financial resources in your hand and start thinking about the future, what it does. And I've seen this in couples who have lived many decades together and they've never put a plan in place. What happens is when you have a plan, it allows you to stop looking at your feet and lift your eyes to where you can start to see into the future. Because the challenge is when we're distracted and we're not fulfilled, we're just trying to take these little steps to where we don't make a mistake. But if you think about walking down the street, what happens? You start crossing the road and you're not looking for traffic, you're not looking for danger, you're not looking for opportunity. You're just trying to not misstep, and you don't see that pole that you're about to walk into or that person. You've seen people like this, right? They're crossing the street, they're texting, they don't see the dangers or opportunities around them. And that's how the vast majority of people live their life. That's what I believe Martin Luther King Jr. said when he mentioned that most people live quiet lives of desperation, that we don't get around to burying people, that most people die when they're young, but we don't get around to burying them until they're much older. That they're so focused on these things, they're so internal, that they can't make decisions in their life. And if you don't have a plan, I'll bet you that's what's happening to you. And because there's no plan in place, and the envy is so strong that you don't feel like you can get ahead, you're staring at the ground, that you want to try to advance it just a little bit faster. Instead of putting in the work, we're going to try to advance it a little bit faster because that credit card came in the mail, or that person called you and told you they have a great loan coming up that you can get at a low interest rate, or maybe an opportunity happens where you can move your credit card from a high interest to 0% interest for a couple months, and that allows you to just take a little bit of that pressure off so you can buy that thing to hopefully make you a little bit more happy. But guess what? Months later, it doesn't make you any happier. And you couldn't afford it to begin with, but now you purchased it on a credit card, now you have to pay it back with interest. You're double penalized. You're getting it before you should, and you're having to pay interest on it. And for some reason, we think that that's going to make us happy. We always know when we cheat on things, it doesn't make us happy. Debt in most cases is just cheating to get it before you deserve it. And the punishment is not only are you not fulfilled, but you have to pay interest on it as well. So you're punished mentally and you're punished financially. Do you know what I find really interesting? As I mentioned earlier, when my wife and I went to the Dominican Republic, what was fascinating to me was these people have almost nothing. Like, put it in the perspective of you making $500 a month. That's basically where these people live. That's about what they make in US dollars on a monthly basis, $500. And things still cost the same. Gas is still the same price. Buying a car is the same price, if not even more, because they're harder to come by. So imagine living your life on $500 a month. And what's crazy is these people are as happy as can be. And I'm not talking about all of them, but a lot of them are so happy. How is that possible? And you've seen these people, they have almost nothing, but they're so happy, and we have so much and we're so ungrateful. And if that doesn't hit you right in the feels, then I don't know what will. And when we're starting to feel all of these things, and that debt is literally a noose around our neck, we start to feel like we have no options. And when we have no options, we start to find that there's no time for ourselves, there's no time for our spouses, we're not happy, we're not grateful, we're not fulfilled. So when we're around them, we have low energy and we're always tired, we're always scrolling, we're always looking for fulfillment, which makes us even more envious because we feel like we're getting further away from where we want to go, and we're trying to grasp tighter and tighter, yet we're slipping further and further away from where we should be. So guess what happens next? Well, two unfulfilled people can't really fill each other out. So the couple gets divorced. And you might read statistics, and some of it happens because of alcohol, or some of it might happen because of lack of commitment, or maybe not being faithful and going out and cheating. All of those are symptoms of the original problem. And that's not being fulfilled. It's not being grateful. It's not having gratitude. And it happens because we're so stressed out and we're going nowhere. And they have no plan to get ahead. They continue to get in debt. Envy just keeps growing. And that divorce now not only hurts them even more financially, so they can be even less generous, now it also hurts the next generation too. You don't think all of this is planned? You don't think the adversary knows all of this stuff and is using that against you? Because at that point, you have almost no chance of being generous. So what if you could stop all of that from happening? What if you could start to invest that time and energy instead of scrolling more on social media, instead of adding and fueling that desire of envy, and you could put a plan in place to start getting out of debt, and you could start working towards something again, and you could put some goals into your life, and you and your spouse could come together probably for the first time in decades and actually decide where you want to go with your life, and you can start working on these things together. And it's not easy, and you're going to struggle, and you're going to miscommunicate, and you're going to have communication issues, and you're going to have errors along the way, and things are going to feel like they get worse before they get better, but they will get better. What if you could start to do that and start to change that direction of your life? And I think for me, I think that starts obviously with understanding and knowing God and getting closer in those faith areas. But it also means coming together and learning what to do financially and putting a plan in place for your finances, putting a plan in place for your future, putting a plan in place that when you have blessings come into your life, you know what to do with them and you don't squander them. And you start learning how to become fulfilled from the inside by being generous with what you do have. And even though it might not feel like a lot, and you're going to be tempted into thinking that you could get ahead faster if only you were less generous somehow, if you were less fulfilled, somehow you could get to that goal a little bit faster. But that's absolutely not true. And I think the way to do that is to become financially literate, become spiritually literate, become literate with what God has to say to do with money, and become financially educated so that you can see opportunities and you can see danger, and you can see it from a biblical perspective that what you're doing is right and that you're headed in the right direction. It doesn't mean that you won't make mistakes, but when you're educated and you're literate, you make better decisions versus just hoping that you're going to get there. The challenge is we weren't taught any of this stuff in school, and so if you're not willing to take the time to get educated and to work on it, it's not just going to happen for you. Unfortunately, all we're taught is the first part of the puzzle on how to make some money, and maybe that's purposeful, that we don't ever learn what to do with it, so we end up in this cycle over and over again. But you can change that for yourself. You can change that by smashing the like button, hitting the subscribe button, hit the bell, so that way you can get additional information and you can learn more about what to do. And click on the links down below if there's something that I can help you with. I would love to be able to do that. Join the community, start getting some of the emails so you can learn how to become more financially literate. You can learn how to become financially independent, because I don't think you can really serve two masters. And that's true from the Bible as well. That's Mark 6:24. You cannot serve two masters, God and money. And the challenge is when we're struggling with all these things and we're not generous and we're not fulfilled and we're not moving ahead, we don't have a plan, we're stuck in debt, unfortunately, we're serving the other master. Now, a lot of people want to use it the other way. It's great to show it in movies and everything else. When was the last time you watched a movie with a Christian who was not the bad guy, right? Hollywood loves to put it that way. But in most cases, I think people serve money because they have to. I think because they don't take care of these things, the only pathway is to serve money because you're so strung out with time, you're not fulfilled, you don't have energy. So the only thing you can do is focus on working. And that means at the sacrifice of everything else that we could and should be doing, of being generous, spending time with our family, because we don't figure out how to get our money right. And if you want to change that cycle for you, it starts with becoming generous. And the way you become generous is by being able to give of your time and to give of your resources. But if you're a slave to money, you can't do that. And as always, I hope this was helpful for you. Don't forget to leave a comment, hit the subscribe button and the bell as well. And as always, I'll catch you later. Bye.